Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Texas, also a veteran and serving in Afghanistan, Mr. Gonzales.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for holding this very important hearing. You know, I spent 20 years in the military, 5 years in Iraq and Afghanistan. I grew up in Afghanistan. I remember being 21 years old, landing in Kandahar, and it was as if I landed on the backside of the moon. Poppy fields everywhere. I remember walking around with a hand pistol, and there was a warlord driving a brand new Range Rover, and I'm going, how the heck did he get a Range Rover on the moon? That's what we were dealing with. And then behind him was a Toyota pickup truck with about 20 people with AKs and RPGs. And so that's the world I grew up in. And those were our allies, right? And so the question I have for you is OEF vets, we will never forget what happened in Afghanistan. We'll never forget that there were 13 Americans killed just days before the Biden administration pulled the rug from underneath them. We'll never forget having to, as many of y'all did, having to put together organizations to go save Americans and also save our allies. We'll never forget those things. But I'm deeply concerned with some of the repercussions of what happened. And in particular, my first question is for Ambassador Sales or Ms. Leadin. As was noted during the opening remarks, the Biden administration left over $7 billion worth of vehicles, weapons, and other gear in the country for the Taliban and other terrorist organizations. Are either of you aware of any reports or evidence showing any of these articles in the possession of U.S. adversaries or being used in armed conflicts outside of Afghanistan? I'm thinking of Ukraine. I'm thinking of all these different hotbeds, Iranians in particular. Any of you aware of any of this material popping up around the world?
Congressman, thank you for the question. In terms of the materials, I am limited as to my scope at this point, but I have heard secondarily from other former colleagues who are still in government that there are some materials that have crossed the border and are turning up in bordering countries that are not friendly to the United States. And I would add to that, if I may, the many Afghan commandos that we trained over the years, many of whom actually came here for training, had to escape because we didn't help them. And so they have escaped to countries like Pakistan and Iran. There have been multiple reports about them some of them joining the Wagner group and fighting on behalf of Russia in Ukraine. So the sort of global repercussions of this continue. Thank you.
My next question is for Colonel Douglas. Seeing firsthand the chaos of the withdrawal, what do you believe could have been done differently in the planning and evacuation efforts? And one thing that in particular comes to mind is Iraq. All right, so at some point we're going to have to get out of Iraq. Ideally, it's not the same situation of what happened in Afghanistan, but that's what's on my mind. What can we do to prevent the next type of withdrawal, whatever that is, from happening?
Well, sir, to talk about Afghanistan, I mean, what could have happened is we had a conditions-based agreement that wasn't being honored, was to follow the condition-based agreement. DOD was conducting planning. There was, all plans were multi-option and multi-jurisdictional. And so I think all agencies working together to come to a workable timeline, I think would probably be in the best interest. And as you mentioned, Iraq, I mean, we've already seen the exit of there once, and the repercussions of having had to go back as a service member to fight the ISIS campaign. I can say that let's make sure that we do that with care, consistency, and confidence as we move forward.
Thank you. My last question, because I'm almost out of time, Ms. Leadin, has any federal agency contacted you about your group's effort to coordinate evacuations, or any other group that you're aware of? And I'll preface with many of our offices essentially turned into mini State Department offices, mini FEMA offices, where we were the ones coordinating. We were the ones helping Americans. One American in particular was an Afghan interpreter that I helped get to San Antonio, and his family, or they would have been killed. I mean, it wasn't a slap on the wrist. Has anyone reached out to you for lessons learned? Any federal agencies?
No, they have not.
See, that's part of a problem. And I think part of it too is we can't let our knowledge, our information end in this hearing. We have to continue to push the issue. That's why I think it's so important and grateful for Chairman Pfluger for bringing this up. We got to continue to get ahead of it because it doesn't end in Afghanistan. Afghanistan doesn't end at those borders. And with that, I yield back, Chairman.